What will be the next Dragon Ball game? Now, I know sparkingzero just came out, but I'm an impatient bastard and I like to talk. So let's cast sparkingzero aside and consider the future. Now, there's two answers to this question. A real one and a speculative one. And I'll give you the real one here at the top because I don't hate you. It's the Dragon Ball MOBA Project Multi. That's what's coming next. We know it's coming. It's that. However, I'm not interested in making a 40-second video where I give you the name of an already announced game. No, dear viewer, we are going deep into the history of Dragon Ball games, taking a look at some industry trends, and we're going to make a prediction as to what the next AAA Dragon Ball game will be. Are you ready? Let's go. Dragon Ball games have been around for a while. The first ever Dragon Ball game I could find in my research was Dragon Ball Dragon Daihikyu, which is a shoot-'em-up type game which was released for the Super Cassette Vision in 1986. In this game, you play as Kid Goku on the Flying Nimbus, swinging the power pole and shooting little blasts out at incoming monsters and bugs. And then the first Dragon Ball Z game I came across is Kyoshu Saiyajin, a Dragon Ball RPG released in 1990 for the Famicom. This game covers the entire Saiyan saga, from meeting Raditz to defeating Great Ape Vegeta. And beyond that, there are so many Dragon Ball RPGs. Honestly, there's more than I thought there would be. We have the Kyoshu Saiyajin sequels, the Legacy of Goku series, Attack of the Saiyans, Dragon Ball Z Horan Kanaru Densetsu, Dragon Ball Z Goku Hishoden, and we have the most recent RPG entry into the series with Kakarot. Historically, the go-to move with Dragon Ball titles is to retell the story of Dragon Ball, naturally, and why not? It's a great story to tell. However, after 30 years of Dragon Ball games, you can see why the more recent titles like Xenoverse and sparkingzero lean heavy into the what-if aspects of the lore, exploring alternative story paths rather than adhering to the canon. But RPGs aren't the only game to come from the franchise, not by a long shot. Of course, Dragon Ball is a franchise built around fighting. You would expect there to be a few fighters among the ranks of Dragon Ball video games, and you'd be correct. There's the Budokai series, the Tenkaichi Budokai series, Fighters, sparkingzero, Xenoverse, Battle of Z, and yes, these are all of the more recent popular ones. But there are so many more. There's Dragon Ball Z Buyu Retsuden, Dragon Battlers, Extreme Budoden, Shin Budokai, Tenkaichi Tag Team, Dragon Ball Evolution the game. What? Wait, they actually made a Dragon Ball Evolution game? If this video gets 500 likes, I'll figure out how to play the Dragon Ball Evolution game. Super Dragon Ball Z, Super Sonic Warriors, the Dragon Ball Z Plug and Play, and a lot more I didn't mention here. The fighting genre is the lifeblood of Dragon Ball Z games. The high-speed action paired with humans' competitive nature and some of the most iconic characters in all of fiction. It's a perfect blend. In addition to RPGs, action adventures, and straight-up fighting games, there's a handful of mobile games and games on handhelds such as the Nintendo Switch and 3DS, some of which I mentioned before. Which of course you have Dokkan and Legends, which are the currently active mobile games. We also had Super Dragon Ball Heroes, a card-based game, which was actually an arcade cabinet exclusive to Japan for quite some time, but that's now slated to be replaced by Dragon Ball Super Divers around the time that this video comes out. There's also Dragon Ball Fusions, a super cool game built around the idea of fusions. So why has this video just been me listing games? Really, it's just to showcase the complete variety that we have, not only in games past, but games we have available to us now. We have almost every genre covered. We have Dragon Ball games on almost every system in every era of gaming. So what could possibly be next? Over the last 20 plus years, gaming trends have changed quite a bit. Back in the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't uncommon to see companies license out their IP to third parties to develop games. However, this wasn't the case for the Dragon Ball series. Dragon Ball Dragon Daihikyu was released by a company called Epoch. However, the game immediately following, Dragon Power, an action game that released in Japan in the fall of 1986, this game would be the beginning of Dragon Ball's relationship with Bandai. Hey, Future Gunge, popping in to say that this game, Dragon Power, is actually called Shenlong no Nazo in Japan, but once it got shipped overseas, it ended up turning into Dragon Power and was pretty much completely stripped of all of the actual licensed elements from Dragon Ball Z. That's all, back to the video. Now, there are over 100 games listed on the official Dragon Ball Games wiki, almost all of which were developed or published by Bandai Namco. But there was a brief period where Atari had the rights to Dragon Ball games. However, in July of 2009, the gaming license for Dragon Ball went exclusively to Bandai Namco, and they've had that exclusivity ever since. However, the gaming landscape itself has changed dramatically since the late 80s. Graphics have gotten better, development time has gotten longer, and there's far more options when it comes to what, where, how, and why of games. Firstly, platforms. Interestingly, and as mentioned, Dragon Ball has always been present on a variety of consoles and devices. There's mobile games, arcade cabinets, games on handhelds such as the DS, the PSP, and PS Vita. I even mentioned that plug and play earlier, but Dragon Ball has always felt like a console homebody, with titles existing on every PlayStation, every Xbox, including the Kinect. They exist on Nintendo hardware going all the way back to the 80s, and of course, PC. At this point, there's really only one medium of game that Dragon Ball hasn't really touched, but we'll get to that later. Next, let's talk genres again for a minute. Like we established, Dragon Ball games have a wide variety of genres. Fighters, RPGs, card games, and even a MOBA in development. However, there are a lot of other genres out there. The most popular video game genres over the last couple years is a pretty consistent list. The order of these genres vary from source to source, but these are all consistently the most popular genre of games. RPGs, fighters, puzzle games, platformers, racers, simulators, sports games, MOBAs, action-adventures, and shooters. Dragon Ball has RPGs, fighters, and now MOBAs covered. So let's talk about what there isn't when it comes to genres and Dragon Ball games. Puzzle games. Surprisingly, there aren't any in-depth puzzle games on the Dragon Ball franchise. I could see a mystery type game where you play as a reporter or Red Ribbon operative or something in the Dragon Ball world, and you have to try to find the truth behind the Saiyans in the core cast. I don't know, could be fun. Then platformers and racers. I put these together because I think they both showcase an alternative side of Dragon Ball. The characters of Dragon Ball have insane movement. Obviously, they can fly and move at insane speeds. This would make for a super cool kart racer type game. As for a platformer, I think an OG Dragon Ball game where the characters can't fly but still move at crazy speeds and jump super high could make for a really solid 2D or 3D platformer. Another untouched genre is simulators. I'm not really a sim player myself, but when it comes to the thought of a Dragon Ball simulator, I just sort of think of a battle sim. And honestly, sparkingzero's CPU versus CPU mode kind of has that covered. Speaking of that, have you considered checking out Fantasy Fight right here on the Gunspot YouTube channel? But if you have any ideas for a Dragon Ball Sims like, leave it in the comments. Sports games. Well, I mean, Mario's done it for years. And Dragon Ball has always had a thing with baseball? I think we can make this happen. Get on it, Bandai. And finally, shooters. There's never really been an FPS Dragon Ball game, unless we count the Kinect game. Which I don't, but honestly, this is a hard sell. Like, who would give Goku a gun? But seriously, there's really only one way I think we could get an actual first-person Dragon Ball game, and I sort of teased it earlier, but that payoff isn't coming yet, so hold on. But even the genres we have games for have adapted so much over the years. I mean, look at the first 2D Dragon Ball fighter compared to Fighters, or Legacy of Goku versus Kakarot. So, are there any genres Dragon Ball games could retread while adapting to a modern style? What else could realistically come next? Well, that's the question, isn't it? I don't think the only option for the next game is uncharted territory. We could get a sequel or a remake. We could very realistically get a new 2D fighter. But I like to think we'll get a new title. Whether it's a new genre or not, well, let's take a look. What are the most popular games over the last few years? Well, the obvious standout is Fortnite. The Battle Royale format has actually been standing its ground, with other anime like My Hero Academia taking a crack at the format themselves to mild success. However, Dragon Ball has made multiple appearances in Fortnite, and I generally think it's too late to hop on the Battle Royale trend, but a Dragon Ball Battle Royale could be pretty sweet. Mobile games. Dokkan and Legends have gotten super popular, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got a new pillar mobile game from Bandai in the next couple of years. Hell, maybe Niantic will take a crack at an AR DBZ game. Alright, I said I don't want a sequel, but I just have to mention Xenoverse 3. Look, I think Xenoverse 3 would be great, but they are still actively making new content for Xenoverse 2, and a game the size and scale and polish that Xenoverse 3 would need to have, it's gonna take a while. Okay, I've been teasing it. This is the payoff. This is 100% coming from a bias on my part, but a first-person Dragon Ball game on hardware that has never seen a Dragon Ball game. You can probably see where I'm going with this. A VR title. You know this would be sick. Being able to fire off beams and fly and do these iconic fights through the eyes of our favorite characters. I would love a VR game. I just don't think it's gonna happen, at least not anytime soon. Firstly, these games are hell to develop, and from Bandai's perspective, I feel as though there isn't enough hardware out there to warrant the development of a solid VR Dragon Ball Z game. Second, there actually has been some talk/development in the VR space. There is an official Dragon Ball Z experience, but it was definitely just a tech demo, and it was only available at specific locations while it was active in 2017. The VR space has expanded so much since then, with the MetaQuest line and higher-end headsets like the Valve Index and PSVR just getting so much better from a quality and control standpoint. It's hard to say if Bandai would want to put in the time on tech that is still seen as in early stages though. I don't think I have to bring up the Kinect again. I think to them, it may just appear as more risk than what it's worth. However, there is another genre that's universally acclaimed, with 4 of the last 6 Game of the Year titles at the Game Awards having this in common, and Bandai already has stake in the genre: the third-person action-adventure slash Souls-likes. Of course, we have Kakarot, which technically falls under the umbrella of third-person action-adventure. However, games like God of War, the Spider-Man series, the entire Souls-like genre would honestly make for a perfect Dragon Ball game. You constantly are made to feel weak in comparison to your opponents. There's a sense of progression and leveling up via unlocking transformations and skills as you go through the story. However, with how common beams and blasts are, and with how fast-paced Dragon Ball Z fights can be, to accurately recreate this in a Souls-like format, it would probably just end up being very similar to what we have in Kakarot, unless it's perfect, an OG Dragon Ball game, going through the story from the Pilaf saga, all of the world tournaments, the Red Ribbon arcs. Not only would it make for an incredible game, but it would also be the perfect way to revisit OG Dragon Ball. Look, the original Dragon Ball is hard to approach. A lot of Dragon Ball fans have only engaged with Z and beyond, and I think short of an entire remake of the original series, that's not going to change. But if there was a well-made AAA action RPG that followed Goku and the story of Dragon Ball, putting you into the shoes of the strange little monkey boy, equipped with nothing but raw strength and the Neobo, I think that would genuinely be the ultimate Dragon Ball experience. But what realistically do I think will be the next big title from Dragon Ball in the gaming space? I genuinely would love to see an OG Dragon Ball game. We've had big titles that cover Z to Super, GT included, and we've had games that create their own story, games that cover all platforms and genres. But through it all, where it all began is often neglected. Hell, the only real OG Dragon Ball representation in sparkingzero, the best-selling Dragon Ball game in years, having sold 3 million copies in just 24 hours, is just Teen Goku. Of course, we have other Dragon Ball characters, but no one else that only appears in Dragon Ball. And do I think this is going to change? Honestly, probably not. So what then? No VR game, no OG Dragon Ball action adventure, no Xenoverse 3. What could possibly be my definitive prediction for what's next? Honestly, I think we're gonna get a new 2D fighter. Whether that's Fighters 2, a new entry into the Budokai series, which would be a grand return to a classic like sparkingzero did with the BT franchise, or something completely new. I think it's entirely possible and extremely likely the next game is a 2D fighter. Fighters released in 2018, which is going on 7 years ago now, and that game has stopped getting consistent updates, certainly no new content. It's possible they slowly let fighters fall to the wayside while building the next entry into the 2D fighter space. At its core, regardless of how much they make in microtransactions in Dokkan, or how hype multi might be, or how many absolutely insane, fully animated fan service ads they make for what was, for a long time, a Japan-exclusive arcade game, fighting is the core of Dragon Ball games. And no matter how far they stray, I think they'll always come back to the core. Nah, I'm just kidding. It's probably going to be Breakers too. Well, that's it. This video was really fun to make. I've never delved into the history of Dragon Ball Z games before, and it was super fun to put together. Let me know in the comments down below what you think is going to be the next Dragon Ball game. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I do a lot of content here on YouTube, from moveset reviews. I have a show called Fantasy Fight where I pit CPUs up against one another in sparkingzero. And I also live stream. So if you're watching this and you see me live, come say hi. But that is going to be the end of this video. Thank you everybody so much for watching. And of course, as always, see you next time.